In this video, we're going to talk about writing a class. How do we create a type of variable that we can use later? So we'll keep using this soccer game example, and there are three main pieces of any class: the fields, the constructors, and the methods. The fields are the information that's a part of this. So the year the game happened, the two teams, and the score. And for a specific game, the 2014 World Cup Finals, we might have this kind of information. But when we're creating the class, we are just saying the type of information that'll be there. We don't really know what the user will use this for. There may be many different games. We're going to protect that. We're going to put it in a bit of a box so that only the soccer game code can access it. Code from other methods, like the main method, can't access this. The second key piece is the constructor. And the constructor's job is to put information in each of those spots and create our soccer game. So right now we're talking about soccer games in general, but when we're talking about one specific soccer game, we'll use a constructor to get all the information in there, to put the year in there, the winning team and the losing team, and get our soccer game totally set up. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit more later. The third key piece are the methods, and often these are broken down into get methods that get information from the game, and set methods that change the information in the game. And then we'll see in next week that we can add some additional methods as well. So let's start writing a main method to see how this all works together. In our main method, we're creating a new soccer game. And whenever we create a new soccer game, that's really saying call the constructor. So our constructor is going to get called. It's going to get past this information here. So it will go to the soccer game constructor. The soccer game constructor will take that information and store it in our fields. Now we've got a specific soccer game. Instead of talking about soccer games in general, we're actually talking about one particular game. You can picture what happens if we don't do that. If we just say, I'd like a soccer game variable called game, we don't create one, we don't create a new game, we just create the variable, and then we say game.getYear. Well, there's no year there. This isn't actually really a game yet, so we're going to get an error message. So let's go back to this code where we've created a game. Now we can ask what was the winning score of that game. So game.getWinningScore calls the getWinningScore method. That will get the winning score from the fields and return it. So points will be equal to 1. And then we can call set methods as well. I'd like to set the winning score to 2. That calls the setWinningScore method, and it changes the winning score. It's now 2, and our method is done. One of the key advantages to having the fields be private, so I can't just say game.winningscore equals 5, is that we can double check that the information is valid. If I try to say game.setWinningscore to -2, that calls the setWinningscore method, and our setWinningscore method is going to double check, is that a valid score? Does that make sense? And since it doesn't, you can't score -2 goals, it's just going to ignore it. It's going to do nothing. So let's go to Eclipse and see how we create this class. We're going to create a class just like we have in the past. And if I want to call this variable soccer game, that's the name I'll give my class. I'm not going to check the main method box because the main method is somewhere else, not a part of the soccer game class. So I'll just click finish here. And I get an empty class. First, I want to create the fields. And I'll write something like int year, string winning team, and so on. These won't actually be part of any method. They're just part of the class, but outside the other methods. Now we said we put them in a box so that other people can't use them. We do that by writing the word private before each variable. So private int year, private string winning team, that means only the soccer game methods can interact with these variables. So I've finished adding the rest of the fields here. Now let's create the constructor. For the constructor, we're going to create a special method. The name of the constructor is always the name of the class. So by putting soccer game here, soccer game is the name of the class, that identifies to Java that this is a constructor. One important thing, just like all of our other methods, we're writing public, but we're not writing static. Methods that are part of a type of variable aren't called static. So this is part of our soccer game variable. We're going to leave off that static keyword. The other thing with a constructor is that we don't have a return type. So normally we would write void if we're not returning anything, or we'd return int or string or whatever information we're returning. Constructors leave that off. They're the only methods that don't have a return type. So public, no static, no void or anything like that. The name of the method is soccer game, just like the name of the class. And then I've written int new year, string new winning team, all the information that I need to create this soccer game. And when I write the method, I can say, well, year should be equal to whatever new year they gave me. Winning team should be equal to whatever winning team they gave me, and so on. So here's our finished constructor. Now let's write a get method. Remember, the job of a get method is to share the private information, so we can't access the year from outside of the soccer game class. But if we'd like to know what year this game happened in, we could call a get method. So the get method for year will return an int. That's just the kind of information our year is. We'll write public, not static because it's part of a variable, and int. And then just by convention, we'll call it get year, or get whatever type of information we're asking for. And then this is really quick. We just return the year. This year is the field, so we look in our soccer game, we figure out what year it was played in, and we return it. Let's do one more example for get winning team. So the winning team is a string. It'll be public string get winning team, return winning team. So again, we get the information from the field and we return it from this method. So get methods will be almost identical to one another. Always public, whatever the type of the variable is, and then get the name of the variable, and then we'll return that variable. Our set method has the opposite idea. Instead of finding out what year is stored there, we want to change the year. So it is also going to be public, but we're not getting any information out, so it'll be public void. We'll call it set year. And then we need to know what we should change our year to. Int new year. And then we'll just say year equals new year. So you call the set method when you want to change what year is stored here. So if you want to change the year of the soccer game to 2015, you'll call set year 2015, and this method will say, I'll change the field to the value you gave me, 2015. And here I've created the set winning team method. You can see it has the exact same structure as our set year. They're both public void. Instead of set year, we write set winning team. Instead of int new year, we say string new winning team. The variable name actually doesn't really matter much, but the key here is that if you want to change the winning team, you've got to give me a string instead of an int. And we'll say winning team equals new winning team. So we'll change the winning team to whatever you said. Now I've added get and set methods for winning score to show you one important advantage to these get and set methods. If we want to make sure that our winning score is a valid number, we can double check that it's valid. So if you're asking me to change the winning score, I can say, well, if the new winning score is greater than or equal to 0, then I'll change it. Otherwise, I won't do anything. I'll just leave it as the old score. This protects our winning score variable. Now it can't be set to a negative number. The only other place this can be changed is in our constructor. So let's add the same code there. If our new winning score is greater than or equal to 0, then we'll say winning score equals new winning score. The constructor has an important difference though. If it's not a valid score, we've still got to set winning score to something. The job of the constructor is to give every field a value. So winning score has to be given some value by the time we're done with our constructor. We'll just give it a default value. We'll say, if you don't give me a valid score, I'll set winning score to 0. And by making those two changes now, it's impossible for winning score to be anything but a valid number. It has to be 0 or above. No main method or no code using this soccer game class can mess that up. So just a couple of important notes to remember. The constructor should always set a value. So if the winning score we're given is invalid, we'll set it to some default number. The other thing is that a set winning score method doesn't have that requirement. We know that the winning score already has a number in there, and it's already a valid number. So if the number we're given is not valid, typically we just don't do anything. We leave the winning score the way it was. The other thing to point out is that a lot of people get this if statement wrong. It's really tempting to say if winning score is greater than or equal to 0. But remember, that's asking if the winning score we already have stored is valid, and we know that it is. We want to double check if the new winning score is valid, because if it is valid, then we'll change our winning score to that number. I'll post this code and I'll finish all the rest of the get and set methods in the code that's posted for today.